And today we have the topic hosting a website using MuleSoft application. So Pritish will be explaining about this. And so I'll read out some safe harbor statement before we proceed to the PPT. So yeah, both the speaker and the host are organizing this meetup in individual capacity only. We are not representing our companies here, and this presentation is strictly for learning purpose only. And this presentation is not meant for any promotional activities. Some housekeeping rules, like recording, we are recording this, and a recording of this meetup will be uploaded to events page, so you can just visit the page after within 24 hours, and you can rewatch this. Okay, questions you can ask at any time. We will enable your mic as well. You can just unmute yourself and ask the question directly, and give us feedback. We do look at that. Okay, and so we have two organizers for this meetup. Myself, I'll introduce. So I am Shubham Chaurasya, working as a professional integration developer in Millennium. I'm MuleSoft certified platform architect and developer. Over to you, Giri.
Yep. Thank you, Shubham. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So, I'm Giridhar, working at Azure as a senior architect. I'm a certified MuleSoft and AWS developer and architect. I'm leading a Mysore Meetup group, and I am a MuleSoft mentor as well. Well, feedback is more important to us. Most of the topics suggested by the participants as part of the feedback are considered, and coming up with those topics we are considering those topics whenever people are suggesting through the feedback form. So please provide your feedback when you get a feedback form. So today we have Prithvesh with us. He's coming up with the topic how we can create dynamic web pages with MuleSoft. So this is his first presentation in the Mule community and through Mysore group. So over to you, Prithvesh. All the best.
Thank you, Giridhar. I'll start sharing my screen. Um, Hi all. One second. Think. Yeah. Hi all. Good morning. Thank you for joining this call. I'm Pritesh. So I have been um, uh, working in MuleSoft for more than 3 years, and my total experience is around 4 years. So today I am here to explain how we can use MuleSoft to host web pages. All right. Normally when we host web pages, what we do is we first build a server where we can actually host the HTML codes and the resources that we have. Apart from that, we need a backend system that we connect to, and between the host and the backend system there is a PHP or something similar that's always running. But since we realize that MuleSoft itself is a standalone server, we don't really need anything like a WAMP or LAMP server in this case, because MuleSoft itself is one. So we decided that to explore this part of MuleSoft, something that has not been explored that much before. All right. So I'll proceed with this. Yeah. One second. Yes. Okay. Right. So what we are trying to show here is that we can actually create the HTMLs, JavaScript, CSS, all that are there to actually develop a web page. We can actually put that inside a Mule code, and with utilizing two things: HTTP static load static resource and parse template. So load static resource, the job of this guy is to basically load the static resources, the basically the scripts and the HTML codes to the Mule runtime so that it can be used while through the runtime. And the work of parse template is to build HTML pages on the go. All right. So, okay. As far as a normal, usual MuleSoft implementation goes following their API-led connectivity, there's always like Experience API, Process API, and then System API. So Experience API almost always simply just hands over the data that they require in like any one of the forms, like application JSON, CSV, XML, and other things, right? Any of the media types that are there. And there's almost always some UI team that are working on the other side who basically captures this data, and they have their own server, and they use wireframing or something like that to build a nice little UI for on top of the experience layer. But suppose we don't have such a team, or suppose this is the only infrastructure we have, then we can actually use MuleSoft rather than having extra infrastructure. We can basically make use of this. And the nice thing is, since we are all used to with data weave code and everything, we can actually inject data weave code within the HTML fields, okay, and make the page more dynamic and responsive, right? So, all right, the first basic connector that we'll talk about is the HTTP load static resource. Um, this belongs to the HTTP module, and as I said, the basic um, use case of this connector is to load the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So basically, the default file that we use, we load it so that in runtime we can find it out where they are. So there is two fields, which is the default file, okay. First is the resource base path. Now, in the resource base path, this is basically the path where the files are kept. Now you can use your local path here also, but that is not recommended because you'll be deploying this to Cloud Hub, right? So I think it's best to use the mule property app.com. All right. The default file will be mentioned here, which will basically be the homepage of your implementation, okay? And attributes will be as is, whatever there is, it'll be automatically there by default. Hmm. So this is the first part, first main component that we'll be using. And the next one is the parse template. All right. Job of the parse template is to take any text, okay, parse it, and find out if there are any database scripts or mule related information over there, so that it can process that and then put it back into that text. All right. Now, yes, so in this case, parse template becomes quite important for us when suppose we are trying to build a dynamic website on the fly. So what we will do is, there are two fields here that needs to be configured in order to use parse template. One is the content and the other is the location. Now, please bear in mind, content and location are mutually exclusive. They cannot be put both together. All right. Content is basically, if you're not using an external file, you put the file content there in the content box itself. Okay. Otherwise, if you have a file, you simply mention that location here. All right. Since my file is in the resources folder under web app folder, so I will simply write that here. All right. You can make it dynamic also, but you cannot use both together. You will get an error over here that any one of these can only be put in. All right. And this also belongs to the core module. Okay. The neat thing about this is, between any HTML code, you can simply put in a data weave like square braces, hash square braces, and put a data weave code inside it. And what it will do is it'll parse through it, process that data weave snippet, and put it back into the HTML code, with whatever details or the solution of that particular data weave snippet. Okay. In this way, what happens is we can build our own piece of HTML code inside that HTML, as and when based on whatever stimuli the code receives. Right. Moving on. Okay. So this is the first step to creating the basic web server. All right. We need a normal flow. Okay, not a subflow, a proper flow. Okay, with an HTTP listener. Right. Now, we create a listener config. Okay, it's a basic listener config. Since we are testing on local, at that point of time, we kept it as 8089. But be sure if we are deploying to Cloud Hub, they should at least be 8081 if it's HTTP, right? Yeah. Now, we will make sure that this HTTP listener config is kept safe. Okay, like this will be the only one that we'll be using. Okay, throughout the entire implementation. All right. The next would be to put the load static resource right beside this listener. What this will do is, oh, all right. So this listener will be listening to a particular base path, right? Yeah. So once that base path will be triggered, they will come to this load static resource. In this load static resource, we will give the base path folder, the default file name, and the attributes, right? So now we will have this, okay, and this will load our HTTP resources, HTML resources, as an I mean whatever we have kept in the web app folder, right? The next stage is to build another flow in the same implementation. Okay, this listener again will have the same listener configuration. All right, except that the path will be different this time. All right, I will give a code walkthrough definitely, which will make things very clearer. Okay, but in this case, the listener configuration will be the same as the previous one. Okay, and just that it will be listening to a different path. That's all right. Now the next thing that we're doing here is in this transfer message we are simply trying to build uh, a particular piece of HTML code through data weave, a variable one which we can simply put it inside the existing HTML code that we used, the HTTP load static. I'm sorry about the background noise if there's any. Giridhar, is there any background noise or?
Yeah,
Yeah, a
little.
little bit. That is fine. You can continue.
I'm so sorry. There's something going on outside. Okay. Um, shall I go on mute for a couple of minutes?
You can go ahead, Pritesh. No
Okay.
issues.
Okay. All right. So anyway, on the rightmost page we have is the HTML code. If you can see that there is this hash square braces vars dot app status response. All right. Within this HTML form. All right. So what we're trying to do is we are on the middle screenshot. We are building an HTML snippet on the fly based on a particular payload, and we are trying to inject that in this HTML script. Okay. Then we go to this parse template. This guy will simply parse this whole HTML template, find out where there are these data weave snippets over there. Okay, process them. Okay, because vars.appStatus response already has this whole thing written in it, right? So it will process this, put that value here. Okay, and then pass it on as a part of the payload back to the response. Okay, and we will be able to see the HTML script after the whole thing has been processed. All right. Um, so this is how two very basic things which are needed to make this whole thing work. All right. So now the second part is capturing data from. Now what we have spoken about is we are putting data inside the HTML page, right? But we are not capturing data. We can also capture data from an HTML page. For example, I'll give an example. So suppose you are creating suppose like a table or something, and within those table there are certain options, okay, and you pick up certain options. Based on the choice of the options, you pick up in MuleSoft and process something, okay. So the options might vary, okay. So in those cases, or maybe you have a button, okay, like you click on it and something happens, right? So all of these you can pick up in Moodle, all right? So for example, in the first case that I'm showing, there is a button, okay, input type, okay, where the name is page, and if you click on this button, submit button, this page name page will have the value managed. This key value pair will be sent to Mule. Now, since this is being sent from HTML to Mule, this will be in the app, in the media type application form URL encoded. All right. So basically, key equal to value pair, like as is shown here. Okay, on the right hand side. Okay. So we can simply make use of this by typecasting the query parameters. And this will come as a part of the query parameters. We can simply typecast this to JSON or in any form. If we are comfortable with your form URL encoded, then well and good, we can use that. So now what we can do is we can use this for any further processing that we want to do. Like we can literally use this to direct our traffic. So in most web pages there is a traffic, right? So like you need to follow a flow of pages, page 1, page 2, page 3, and based on the buttons clicked on page 2, you decide whether you want to go to page 3 or page 4. So you can use this to actually guide that flow, right? So if somebody clicks on a button, page equal to manage, you go there. If somebody clicks on some other button where page equal to something else, you can simply use that in your data wave, in your MuleSoft code, to guide the traffic there. Okay. So this is one implementation, and the other, there's also another way of doing this. So this is what I was talking about. So in, suppose this is like a table, okay, and in each row, mm, you have an option, tag. All right. So in the options tag, you have two choices: to start or to stop, right? Basically, you're selecting the status of what an API should be, should you start or stop, okay? And these are for, like, suppose over here, there are two different APIs, and there's a submit button at the end, all right? So you need to capture, suppose a user clicks on start in the first API and clicks on stop on the second API. So the moment you press, the user presses submit button, what happens is Mule receives these options, I mean the chosen options, as a part of its payload. Again, in form URL encoded format. All right. Now again, what happens is, now this is like two of them, right? So this will be parsed as, if you convert this to JSON, okay, typecast this to JSON, what will happen is two objects will be created. One object will be created with two key value pairs in it, okay? Like the object will basically look like client notification API colon start, comma, account details API SB colon stop. Okay. Now, if you want to convert it to an array, you can simply use pluck and create your own nice JSON array or something, and make use of whatever you want to do with this particular payload. So in this manner, you can actually, not only just create dynamic HTML web pages, but also from responsive pages, okay, where users are given a choice in certain places. You can capture those choices also in MuleSoft, and do whatever is necessary with those choices. Maybe open a different page, or trigger some backend operation based on the options that are chosen. All right. All right. So I will now. So I use references from MuleSoft, and I will now proceed with the code walkthrough. All right. I'll talk about the setbacks faced when when I'm done with the code review. All right. So firstly, I'll start off with this. One second. Let me. I think I'll have to reshare my screen. One second. Yeah. Um. All right. Hi. Can you guys see my screen, Giridhar?
Yeah, your studio
Yes.
and code is visible,
This
both of
is
them.
fine, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay, now, okay, like I had spoken about, right? So on the left hand side, we have the studio. On the right hand side, we have the HTML, all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScripts open. All right. So I'll start off with this. Okay, let me show you this one. All right, main resources. Okay, so under main resources, okay, I have created a folder called web app. Okay, and within this web app folder, I have created all of these HTMLs that I need. Okay, the script, basically, JavaScript to make the whole thing responsive, and a CSS, CSS file. Okay, a style sheet. Okay, so the basic use case of my demonstration here is, so we decided to keep Cloud Hub as the backend system for us. All right, so we have the runtime manager, right? So suppose we want to expose, this a very limited form of runtime manager to the clients. Okay, and all they can do is see the listed APIs that have already been deployed. All right. They can see the status of those APIs. I mean, whether they're deployed, deploying, or undeployed. Okay. And they can simply start and stop those APIs. All right. And in a nice little HTML UI, and okay, so that they can use it. They don't need any other technical capability to do that. Okay, so they can simply use that UI, HTML UI, to make use of that. All right. Now I'll first walk through the code, and then I'll give you the demo of what is happening. So as I said, for the load static resource flow, we have this listener. All right, just give me a moment. Okay, now this listener has the basic path that is there for all paths. All right, but if I open the listener configuration, it is the usual 000. It is pointing to 8081 because it was deployed to Cloud Hub. Okay, so all information on 0008081 will be listened to by this listener. All right, based on this listener config, right? As soon as we trigger any traffic in that path, in that port, we'll come to this load static resource. Load static resource has, from mule.home web app, it'll pick up all of these and load them. All right, and that's it for the load static resource part. All right. Um, Now we come to the main implementation flow. All right, the one which will actually be guiding the whole um, the HTML web page flow and everything, the traffic and everything. All right. So here we have a listener again. If you notice, we have the same listener configuration here. All right, 8081.000. All right. Now, the only difference here is that if you click on this listener, back there it was /star, but in this case it's /web app. All right. Basically anything, you can keep anything here, okay, but it should have the same listener config, except the path will be according to whatever you need. Okay, you can keep it anything, and you need to hit this path so that you can trigger this particular flow. All right. If you don't have this, so people can ask that if you, oh, yeah, what if you don't have this flow? What will happen is simply, because you already have parse templates in your implementation flow, HTMLs will get created. But since you do not have, the scripts and the style sheets loaded because you don't have the load static resource, none of the styling aspects of that page or the responsive aspects of that page, which is brought on by JavaScript, will be present there, right? It will be a very bland static page, uh, uh, you know, produced by this flow without the HTML load static resource, HTTP load static resource. Yeah. Anyway, so now we have configured the listener. So let's proceed. So what we are first doing is, we are first picking up the query parameters and everything. Okay, because we know that every time, once this code is deployed, the output of each one of this particular implementation will always be an HTML page. Okay, so like we used to use Postman to see if this code is working or not. In this time, we will not be using a Postman. We will simply use Chrome to actually hit the home page, basically the basic page that you have kept here in the load static resource. We will hit the home page, okay, and this will start working. All right. Now we are for setting some initial values over here. All right, home path is basically the loop back. I mean, every time for session management, if you click on the home button from any place, you can come direct to the home. So we set up the home button there. See, basically, we were testing for Cloud Hub, which is why we have kept the Cloud Hub URL here. This has to be dynamic. Okay, so you'll have a dev config file and you'll have a local config file, I'm sure. So we'll have to pick up that value from here. If it's local, this part of the URL has to be the loopback URL. Okay, 127.0.0.1. All right, so that or localhost slash web app, so that you can come back to this particular folder web app. Okay, it's a loopback one. But if you're using it from Cloud Hub, you loopback often always does not work, so have to be a little careful with that. All right. So next, what we are doing is, we are using the Cloud Hub configuration. All right. Using this Cloud Hub configuration, we are picking up the list of I mean, APIs that are mm, deployed to Cloud Hub. Okay, and we will get that. So here we have this query parameters. Why do we? I will show you why we have query parameters here, because as I said in the presentation, that whenever we click a button and there is, suppose, an input type where we have assigned some values there, like page equal to manage, they come as a part of the query parameters, which we are storing in this variable called temp query params. We are using that to route the traffic. Also, in another case, as I said, that there can be options. You select those options, and according to those options, you do something. Okay, when once you click OK, those options will be sent as a part of the payload. So I've used that combination of query parameters and payload to actually manage the traffic and which page to open next. All right, through this choice router. All right. So in the first place, it's if page equal to manage and payload is not empty. This is for the second page. I'll explain it further. Okay. Anyway, once we have the list of applications that we're getting, we move to this particular flow. Okay, which where the conditions are that page equal to manage and payload is empty. All right. So we move to this particular flow reference. Okay, we move to this flow reference. So it's the initial page subflow. All right. So, all right, just a second. Okay, so here we are trying to build the home page. The home page is what? Basically a table with simply the the APIs, okay, the names of the APIs, followed by the status, followed by um, uh, a button which says that do you want to manage your apps. All right. So I'm going to open an instance of that and show it to you. All right. Okay. So this is ideally the page, home page that I'm talking about. Okay. The moment you hit your deployed API slash web app, okay, this HTML page will be opened. All right. And I can show it to you through my runtime manager that these are the 4 APIs that are currently deployed to runtime manager right now. All right. So going back to this page, the names are there and the status is there. All right. And we have a manage your apps button here. All right. Now I'll go back to my studio and sorry, my bad. All right.
Which we have questions. You want to answer them right now or in
At the
QA?
end. At the end.
Okay, all right.
All right. So, okay. So you saw that page, right? So now, see, the names of the APIs that are deployed is coming from this list applications, right? We need to store that and we need to put that inside, inject that inside the HTML code. So we are doing it through this particular, piece of snippet, data wave snippet within the HTML. All right. This is where we are setting up this particular value. If you can see it, would you like me to zoom this part? Um, because this part is not, I don't know. Okay, so we are building that through here. Okay, so table tr th, which will be the table headers and the table details. All right, this is keeping it as output application slash xml is a very easy way of creating htmls or any like tag based things. Okay, all you have to do is write this particular thing, write declaration equal to false, so that the declaration of that html file which normally comes with every xml files, okay, it will not be there. Okay, and for any attributes that you want, like if you look at this, these are simply attributes, right? You can simply use this as the attribute, okay, and create it, and then you can simply inject it inside this html code, right? Then what happens is so you create this, okay, then you do a parse template. In this parse template, see, get all app status.html. What it will do is it will open this particular piece of code. It will find out that on line number 13 there is this database snippet. Okay, it already has that variable stored in it. It will simply print the response inside this in within line number 13, and then pass it on to the payload. Okay, because I have not mentioned anything in the output, it will automatically pass it on to the payload. And since that is the end of this particular line of code, that will be your output. Okay, if you open this link on postman, it will simply give you the the whole html that you want, but in chrome you will basically see the representation of that code. Okay, so I'm going to click on manage your apps. Okay, so I clicked on manage my app. What happened was the the code changed a little bit. Now we have a home button which we can click to go back to that previous page that we wanted. And against each of these APIs, we have a drop down, right? And what do each of these drop downs say? Start, stop, all of them. All right. So you can assign each of these to these, APIs. Okay. But first, I want to talk about how we came across to this page, right? So when we clicked on this particular submit button, if you can see here, when we clicked on this particular submit button, we have this hidden input type page equal to manage, right? Now, if you remember here, okay, in the first one, when we loaded the home page and we clicked on manage, what happened was we went to this particular default part because none of these. Wait 1 second. No, my bad. So when we clicked on manage, we went to this particular flow because here payload is empty. We didn't send anything as a part of the payload. All we sent is this particular query parameter, which is manage equal to page. Now, when that is the case, what we are doing is we are loading that particular page. This time it is this flow reference dashboard POC subflow. It's this one. We are loading this get status change page, okay, which is this one. This is the load status page, okay. Here again, we need to insert the API names, right? But since each of these calls are new calls, right? You have to call, like for us, we had to call the list API again because the moment you clicked on that submit button, it will again hit this listener and it will start this flow again. Okay. Now, this time with the query parameter, and we are checking what that query parameter is and coming to this particular flow. Here, again, we do this list application. We are getting the app status response, but we are also creating the home button here. Okay. We are creating the home button here like this. Okay. This is the home return home part. Okay, why we are creating this? Because home path might change, right? As I said, in Cloud Hub it might be different, in your local it might be different, which is why we are creating our own home button code snippet in HTML through data weave. Okay, we are creating that and we are creating this is there. Okay, so this is a little different from our other parts. So as I said, we had options, right, to start and stop, right, each API. That is what we are doing here. We are mapping over the response of the list application, right, and against each of them we are assigning this option, okay, to start and to stop. Okay, whatever we'll select will be picked up as the value once we click on submit. All right, and then we are sending it across to parse it. Again, this will be handed over to the payload and it will complete the full circuit and be shown as a response. And this is the page that we have. So since we saw that all four are running, I'll simply stop these two. Okay, what will happen is I'll first walk through the code once so that it is easier for you to understand. Once I click on the submit button, what will happen is the options will get stored against the API names as a part of the payload. Okay. Now payload is not empty anymore for the next round of uh, next run. So what will happen is we will hit this particular block. Okay, where page equal to manage and payload is not empty, right? It'll come to this. So then what will happen? Go to reference flow. Okay. What will happen is we'll come here. We will simply parse the payload. Okay. Because it was in, URL encoded form. We are simply plugging it and creating our own nice little payload. Okay. Which is an array where app name will be kept separately. Against that will be the status. Okay. So it'll be a nice key value. It'll help us process everything here. So now we can have one or we can have many. So I used parallel for each, and for each application, whatever is the status, I'll simply call the Cloud Hub endpoint. Okay. um, and provide the particular status here, payload.status I'm providing here. Okay. And in the URL, you need to provide the application name. So I'm providing that here on the fly. It will change the status, and yeah, that's it. It will, and then there's another flow reference, I think. Yes. And this guy, what this guy does is go to reference flow. What this guy does is it will simply take you to the main homepage. Okay, once it is done, right? So I'm going to do that. Okay, so stop, submit. All right. Now see, it took us to the main page, right? And now these two are now undeployed, right? Now we can go back there again. Okay. Sorry. Wait, what happened? Yeah, we can go back there again. So let's start those two. Okay, again. Submit. Okay. Now this will show undeployed because it has not, started yet. But what we can do is we can simply call the homepage again from here, right? We can simply call the homepage here again, and hopefully, yeah, see, these two are getting deployed right now, right? And I can open, run and see they're, getting deployed. All right. So this is how you can make use of you see, we captured this data from the HTML page, right? We captured that we wanted to start this API, we captured we wanted to stop this API. We also populated the table with information on the fly, right? We can add more APIs here, and you do not have to change anything in the code. It will automatically take care of it, right? So this is, how we sort of build these, we create web pages through MuleSoft. All right. Now, there are certain things that we faced while building this. As I said, there was a particular setback that we faced. Okay, so I'll go back to here. So we faced a particular setback. Okay, so the problem here was that one second. Okay. The problem we faced here was, since this is an HTML listener based implementation, right? We thought that we could implement a RAML based solution, right? Like there'll be a RAML, and you'll have an API kit router. We used a choice router, right, to route the traffic, but this can be done by the API kit router, right? We tried to implement that, but somehow when we were trying to do that, MuleSoft was not able to load the load static resource. Okay, so these CSS scripts were basically missing, and as a result, all of those HTMLs were getting built by parts templates without any scripts running behind them. And yeah, I mean, whatever we expected it to do, it was not doing. Now we do not know if that is a limitation or not. It's just that we couldn't end up implementing them basically through RAML. So that was one of the only setback we faced. But I understand through each of these, a web developer might do a much better job than I did, because I'm not a seasoned web developer. So sky's the limit if you want to do that, because there's endless things you can do now that you can parse it here. All you have to do is be careful about how you're capturing and putting in data, and how you're managing the traffic. That is the part of the Mule developer, and maybe building the HTMLs and everything will be the job of a web developer, or anybody can pick it up in between. So yeah, so this is as much as there is for me from me. Okay, so I heard people have questions, so
Sure,
please.
Pratish. Yeah. So we have one question from Ravindra. Like, can we use your URI parameters?
Just one second, which screen are you guys seeing? It's the Q&A page, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, please tell me. Yeah.
Yeah. So can we use URI parameters?
URI parameters for what?
Um,
Which
Ravindra,
one?
yep. Ravindra, if
Hi.
you can, yeah.
Yeah, hi. So in transform message, you're stored like you're passing attributes dot query params, right? So can I use their URL parameters? URL
Rather than
parameters?
query parameters.
Yeah, you have used in query parameters, right? Like name equal to manage like that.
I'm sure you can. I mean, you just have to find out how you do that basically. Okay. So, what is happening is these are basically, query params is something else. It's basically you're querying something, and against that, you are putting a parameter against it, right? When you click a button. URI parameter definition is something else. A URI parameter is basically an address where you store a particular, information. So conceptually, URI parameters and query parameters are quite different. So I can't say whether URI parameters actually fit in over here. All right. But what
Okay.
you can do is you can route the traffic to a page where, with a URI parameter where your page or your resource is actually there. Okay. But I
Okay.
don't think clicking a button and all of that will actually, you can use URI parameters because conceptually they're two different things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one more from Sai. Like, can we implement JavaScript libraries or React.js also?
Yeah, definitely you can because HTML will run on its own, right? All you're doing, what Mule is doing is providing you a server, a platform to host your HTMLs, right? So long you have that, you can simply use that, all right?
All right. I think we had one question like, is there a difference between parse template and load static resource?
Yes, I mean load static resource loads all. See all of these on as I showed. Wait, let me see. Um, 1 second. Let me open my studio. Okay. So see on the right hand side, all of these things, the scripts, the style sheets, and the HTMLs, right, that we are using, this is loaded by the load static resource. All right. I mean, you will not be able to, see parse template, you've already mentioned this whole code, which is why when you parse it, it will work. But you have assigned things like, text slash JavaScript where, the script is mentioned here, the style script is mentioned here. Parse template will not be able to find these two things. Okay, these two things. This is the job of the load static resource to have it there in the runtime so that when parse HTML is running, it will be able to load these two things. All right. This is the difference between parse template and load static resource. Load static resource loads the resource in the runtime, okay, so that anytime you need it, you can grab it from there. Parse template basically parses this whole thing. It will, so there are two different ways of parsing, this DOM parsing and SAX parsing. So they'll pick up each one of these and try to read what's inside this, okay, till it comes to a part where it actually has a data wave snippet. Okay. Now this data wave snippet, then it will, what it will do, it will stop the entire, parsing. It will go into this part. It will check in the Mule runtime whether there is an instance for this particular variable or not, if there is any value stored in or not. Whatever value has been stored, it will be replaced in place of this. Okay. Again, it will start parsing, fill up the rest of the information, and send it back as a payload. Okay. Now with, HTML instead of this. All right, because you built the app status response in this transfer message. Okay, that is the job of parse template. All right. Load static resource is simply helping you with, these resources being present at all times. Okay.
Okay, so we have one question from Jay. Like, what is the minimum required resource on Mule server when we have to host this website which you have for demo?
We are running on the trial version. It's just like the absolute basic things. It will depend upon how much you need and your requirement. We haven't ever built like a very complicated set of web implementations this was just like a POC. So we don't know, against what sort of work we need, what sort of resources are that. But I can assure you, whatever this we have built here, it ran on the lowest settings, as provided in the trial account. All right. That was the question, right? I mean, unless I